Got it. Or got it. Yeah.
See that? There you are.
Hi.
Hi, Priscilla.
Hi, how are you?
Doing okay, thanks. How are you tonight?
Good. Okay, let's see.
How was your day today?
Pretty good, I'd say. Nice sunshine. Got out for a walk. Yeah, just nice all around.
I beat that. All right. Looks like we've got Frank.
Yeah.
Chris. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna get a couple last minute things and we'll be ready.
No Nate today.
All right, cool.
All right.
Nate said he'd be unavailable today.
Okay. And John, we did not hear anything from John specifically, but sometimes he pops in a little bit late, so we'll see.
Yeah, so call to order, and Chris, if you want to do the virtual meeting rules.
Yes. So according to the city's, oh, there's John. Great. City meeting rules. Commissioners can remain on video, preferably muted, to facilitate conversation and not talking over each other and eliminating background noise. So if you can generally stay muted when you're not talking, that's awesome. And for visitors, I see we have one, Dean. If you want to talk in public forum, you are welcome, of course, to do that. Though please keep your video off for the whole meeting. So any comments would just be audio and not video, so as not to be distracted to the, or commissioners would not be distracted during the meeting, I believe is the intent of that rule. That pretty much encapsulates it.
Okay, great. I wanted to say something a little bit special today, given that it's yesterday was officially a new federal holiday recognized along with Columbus Day. It was Indigenous Peoples Day. And, you know, the city of Ashland had a proclamation back earlier this year that the city council would declare that, and I'm just going to quote a little bit of what they said, we're not obligated by rules to necessarily do this for the commissions, and some commissions do, or some version of this proclamation. And so I'm going to just do my version for today. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that we acknowledge and honor Aboriginal people on whose ancestral homelands we live. We also want to honor the diverse Native American communities who make their home here today. And also I'd like to honor all the people that came before us in forest management. And I want to acknowledge that, you know, for the most part, I think people were doing the best they could given the information and the knowledge and the memories that they had and what we're learning and relearning. And I think the best way to acknowledge and honor all that is by taking care of the land that we now are on, and we play a pretty big role in that. And what we're doing now is a very big role in that. So I just wanted to offer that. So that's all I have to say there. And if we proceed with our agenda, we want to approve the minutes. We don't need to because it's being recorded. And then a public forum.
Oh, so can I say one thing about the minutes? I have finally figured out the technology behind doing all of this. And following the lead of other commissions who I, as the administrative secretary, resigned downtown, I inherited the YouTube account, and I discovered, lo and behold, that's where people put their commission minutes.
Oh, wow.
About how we upload the minutes to YouTube. So I have one set of minutes up there. That was my first try at that, which was last month's. So I put the link in the chat, although I know the chat is not part of the public record for the meeting. And I will, but I will go back and repost the agenda with the link to meeting minutes from last month in it, so that you could either copy it out of the chat right now if you want to watch them later, and or go back, and by tomorrow I'll post the agenda with the chat with the link to it. And then we'll proceed with getting all of the minutes posted from like the last year or so. They'll all be up there soon enough. That's
great. Great. Thank you. And I don't know about minutes necessarily, but at some point when we're really getting into the meat of this planning process, we may decide that we still want to take physical notes, because I know, and I'm not inclined to go back and listen to 2 hours of meeting to try and catch, what was it that Marty said there? Or, what was that decision? And so at some point, but not today. Anyways, public forum. I heard there was somebody named Dean on, and I'm Dean Silver. Do you have anything you'd like to add, or why you're here today? I'll give him a chance to unmute if he wants.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, John. Okay, we'll keep going. And any adjustments to the agenda? I'm gonna put my glasses back on so I can read.
You also have Charisse for public comment if she wants.
Oh, I did not see her in the queue. So I don't know, Charisse, do you have anything?
No, and I lost my computer for a while, so sorry that Walter's name is on it. I'm here.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll start with our ongoing business. Oh, I will say, okay, we've got this new commission time. And at the very end, if we have time, this is the thing, Chris, that I would add to the agenda. I just have a note to say about trail signs in the watershed.
Okay.
So if we can, if we have time, I will try and get to that. And so now we're doing the climate process update and discussion. And I think John Owen and Frank and Leslie and Chris all met and came up with a pretty good introduction. And if you guys want to talk about that, Chris sent it out. Don't know how many people got a chance to read it. Or if you guys talked about who would take the lead on talking about that, how do you want to do that?
We didn't talk about that. Any volunteers? Frank, you want to talk about it? John? Now Leslie is late and engagement, but I'm sure she would chime in too if she was here. Do you want me to share my screen so it's up on the screen?
Sure.
I have it here. Question is this one. Okay. Is it up?
Okay, Chris, I can see the screen and what you're sharing, but I cannot hear you now.
Oh, I actually wasn't saying anything.
Oh, okay. So
I didn't know if somebody else was going to jump in, or we were just going to read it, or how you want to go about it.
people being shy, I think. I'll just say, John, why don't you at least start, and Frank and Chris.
You want me to start reading it?
Well, just tell us what's in it, or summarize, or however you want to present this to us. We asked for it because we wanted some background and wanted a clear direction on what it is we're doing. And, you know, sort of my plea was to get a document that would have a very short, concise, why are we doing this? Why here? Why now? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, I don't know if I worked on this.
No, you didn't.
Oh,
sorry,
no, John Williams, John Owen, I'm talking about.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I think it's will serve as a good foundation for the things the city wants to do with the Ashland watershed and addressing climate change in a proactive way. And I think that was at least my understanding of the goal. And I think that Chris really laid it out well, and Frank and Leslie and I chimed in. And I think from my read, it's a pretty good foundation, I think. What do you think, Frank?
Yeah, it's still a draft, but it's the draft we're going to go with. This is something I thought about. You remember there was part 3 in there? We were talking about a mortality event, or potential for a mortality event, and we took that out. And this is, like I said, this is probably better for Luke, but I was thinking about the forest health aerial surveys, the mortality surveys that are done annually. Every time we've had a mortality event, you can go and look and you can see the drought a year or two before that. And we took it out of this part, but it might be something that Luke could put in to the veg part, saying that in the past, you know, 1 or 2 years after drought events, we see a wave of mortality. And we can give some examples of that too. Those surveys go back like 50 years. So anyway, that's not too much on this piece. I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay, well, maybe, let's see.
So I left a dangling sentence in the first page there. I'll go back and fix how that got through.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable.
How about, does anybody have any questions? Does this clear up things for people about what it is we're doing?
I have a question, Sil. This is John Williams. So what is the plan for this document once you finalize it?
That's in here, John. It is right here, this middle paragraph. The document will be an amendment to the Ashland Forest Plan to include appendices with data and tables in each chapter. Content will focus on those specific climate change. I won't read the whole thing, but that's what we will do with it. And then if we come up with a list of suggested actions, or maybe it's like just describing project development, not like writing silviculture prescriptions necessarily, but saying, based on our assessment of the science and our own data, we think these general things need to happen in accordance with the Ashland Forest Plan, and specifically those things that we need to change. We'll get into the persist change thing in a minute here, so I don't want to get too far into that, but
I guess I meant who's going to get this document, like city council, staff, other commissions?
Yeah.
Or everybody?
All of those.
All of those. Okay, cool.
All of those.
Awesome. Yeah, this looks great.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Luke. I like the last sentence of that second to last paragraph about implementation. And I apologize, I just came back from vacation, so I did not have a chance to review this, but I do plan to read it. Is implementation mentioned earlier on as well, or is this the first mention of implementation in this paragraph of this part?
I think that might be the first mention. Because it just really describes the process up to that point.
Well, I guess that raises a question for me that
was there a previous page?
Yeah.
Okay, and so implementation is not mentioned in the beginning. Is there anywhere where it would fit in? Or I realize that we are talking about the forest plan and it's really a planning document, but is there anywhere where implementation would fit in any of this?
I'm not, like, what would you like to see?
You know, maybe we could just table this until I have a chance to read over it a few times.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my question is along those lines too, in that, so are we doing recommended actions? So is this a strategic, a strategic plan that project implementation would refer to, or will this actually be project implementation?
I see this as the strategic plan that project implementation will refer to. And we can get, if we get to the point, once we talk more about the persist change, specific actions that are going to change or that we take up that maybe we haven't done in the past, or, even persisting with certain things may result in actions on the ground, as that's what we've done in the 20 whatever year history of city lands management is, follow through with the recommendations, and some of those recommendations are still going to be valid, and we'll continue doing those things like maintenance underburning. It's still going to be valid, I can only imagine, and we'll keep doing maintenance underburning where appropriate, but where other actions are maybe a change or we'll talk in detail about that. But yeah, on the process point, this would be the strategic plan that we tier specific action implementation to.
Okay, well, that helps for me. So, well, I want to thank you guys for doing it. It's, it was helpful for me, and I appreciate that you doing it, and I think it will be helpful, for the public to understand what it is we're doing as well.
I'm sorry, I have one more follow-up question on that, or just comment. Again, with the implementation, my understanding is that there's like a time-sensitive nature to this, and part of it is the mortality that's occurring of the large conifers in some of the city forest lands. So is this document, I realize it's a planning document, but we're essentially advocating for time-sensitive implementation to deal with some of the new mortality. Is that correct or no? I'm just wondering if implementation needs to play more of a role in this document.
Well, as I understand it, Luke, if we were going to salvage any of that mortality, we could do it with our existing forest plan and Marty's compliance with, Oregon state laws and et cetera, et cetera. So while I think we are, and anybody, if I've got this wrong, again, please tell me. But while we might address mortality in general and talk about things that would trigger, salvaging or not, we might put that in the plan, but specific to the mortality that's going on right now, if we needed to do it, we don't need to rush this planning process. Is that correct?
I guess I didn't mean rush as so much as it was one of the driving factors, but I think you've answered my question that we don't need to, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. So we'll just focus on this as a planning document, and that works for me.
Definitely.
All right.
Frank's got a hand up.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm not seeing the.
Oh yeah, I'll stop the
gallery
screen.
view.
Stop the screen share. There we go.
Okay, Frank.
Yeah, as far as implementation goes, off the top of my head, I can think of some projects pretty easily, like what Luke's talking about. We could look at the stand densities that we have right now, and we've probably got 20 units that are candidates for thinning, just based on their density. And so that would be the type of thing we could add in there and say, here's some candidate units that we're going to look at, but not necessarily saying right now, yeah, we're going to do management here, but here's the ones we're focusing on. So I'd like to see that level of identification done.
Frank, I think that's already in the Ashland Forest Plan. Remember, this is specific to climate change.
Right.
So that density monitoring is already a data point that we've got from the last plot resampling, whether that's back to 2017 now, but nonetheless, that direction, Marty has set that out pretty clearly through the Ashland Forest Plan and past project implementation, where we see high relative densities that we go in and try to ease those stands out of that. So there might be other reasons to say that about in the climate change arena, why that's important and how that might become more of an issue or present a different kind of issue because of climate change. But in and of itself, we could do that tomorrow without all this work, because that's largely what we did in 2004, both in capturing mortality, of where I can't remember the percent, Marty, by board foot, that where it was dead trees in the 2004 sale, but a not insignificant amount, and reducing relative density was a goal back in 2004 in the old forest plan, much less the revamped version from 16. So I think we're on pretty firm ground on a lot of stuff. We just got to keep reminding ourselves we're only writing about climate change as it impacts our future management. If things persist, which is I think why Marty chose that approach, then we're on firm ground already.
Well, what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think. Oh.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Frank.
All right. I was thinking specifically, usually our threshold's like 0.6 relative density when we start looking at thinning units. As it's getting hotter and drier, maybe we should drop that down to 0.5. And that'd be a difference, because we haven't done that before. That'd be a lower threshold to look at units at. So that would be
there you go.
Difference.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is exactly an example of those things we would address going forward. And we just need to remind ourselves, we're not throwing out the old forest plan, and we certainly want to recognize what the existing forest plan, allows us to do and recommends for us to do. And, much of that is still very valid. And so we're looking at, according to the document that was just put up there, we're looking at the climate change chapter and what needs to be addressed in that chapter in order to bring our climate adaptation up to date. So anything else then on this introductory document? And I'm not seeing everybody's hands all at once. I'm not seeing anybody's hands. So, okay. let's go on to this discussion of the persist change discussion. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time on this in those terms of persist and change. And we've been asked to use those terms specifically so that we're using a common language and common and common definitions going forward. I think that's critical to any, group work. We have to have those kinds of things in common. So I asked Marty to talk a little bit about how he decided that. We've seen that there are a lot of terms and being used in this climate adaptation literature. And I personally don't know what is better or worse, or what, helps us adapt more or less. But I trust that Marty did way more research than I'm willing to do. And I'm all in. If Marty says he's looked at it and says, these are good terms to use and gives us a definition so we can work with them, I am totally good with that. And of course, we're all going to keep our minds open. We see something new and groovy as we go forward, or the public brings something up. Well, we can look at that. I'm not closing my mind, but I am trying to narrow it down to this common language. So with that, Marty, do you want to talk a little bit about persist and change a little bit?
Yeah, be glad to. I've got a little presentation, Chris, if you can stick it up. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history, as you might expect. With climate change moving as fast as it has been, and our professional understanding about it, some of the approaches and the terminology moves along with it. And so I'm just, Leslie asked for this, and I think it's a good time. I think it's great to kind of put us all in the same boat here. So the first slide, you can see this came right out of the forest plan, and it presents 3 adaptive strategies that are highlighted in red there. And it was from a publication by Millar in 2007 that is still quite often used today. And so I thought it'd be really good to kind of go through that framework, as well as others that have evolved since then. Let's go to the next one, Chris. So that was 2007. Then in 2014, the first presentation of a climate smart approach to climate change. Really quite a good document. I'll let you read that, but in a nutshell, you can see in the last sentence that they, at that point, kind of evolved away from using resistance and resilience and transformation. They tried to simplify to outcomes, change, and persistence. And upon looking at that pretty hard and some of the other stuff out there, I felt like that was probably the best use for us in the Forest Lands Commission, is to stick with the 2 categories, change and persistence. But I'm going to run through what each of these mean and provide some examples, so you can kind of all be on the same page with the kind of the professional explanations as to what these mean with climate change. So let's go on to the next one, Chris. I like this visual representation of resistance. And it's basically the most important element of resistance that we're trying to stick with in the watershed on our lands is, you know, to move away from high severity wildfire and the impacts that are associated with. And so that's a strong resistance stance. We really want to try to do everything we can to resist that change. Let's go to the next one, Chris. Resilience. It's the capacity to respond to a disturbance after recovering from ecosystem structure and function. That's a great slide of resilience. I mean, he got back up, as many know, and continued going. In other words, the blow was not so much that it permanently disabled him, recovered. I like to point to the most important element of resilience we have in forest ecosystems is our below ground mechanisms. You know, 50% of the carbon goes below ground. We don't think about it much. You know, we're so focused above ground and all vegetation and wildlife and all the things we can see. But if we had, for example, a high severity disturbance in the watershed, the persistence and the ability of those below ground systems, the vigor of those are our strongest mechanism of resilience. So it's a great way to look at it. And, you know, a lot of times resistance and resilience can happen side by side. These are not simple terms necessarily. There's been a lot of confusion in how they're used back and forth. One example is in doing thinning and prescribed burning, that's definitely a form of resistance, trying to maintain our systems and not go through a large scale, high severity disturbance. But often that practice simultaneously encourages development, either naturally or through our efforts in planting, of trying to get more ponderosa pine into those systems. So the same exact event has elements of resistance and resilience. Mostly in this terminology, it really should have been the Ashland Forest Resistance Project, because AFR really was an attempt to hang on to and to create opportunities to hang on to those values that we have up there. Yeah, I'm not saying that resistance is always the desired end product on every land, every ownership, everywhere in Southern Oregon. But in the Ashland watershed, with those really important values we have up there, late successional habitat, municipal watershed, in addition to the proximity of town to the watershed, then resistance is just really elevated in that piece of real estate. Let's go to the next one, Chris. And certainly on city ownership. So here's a picture of losing resistance, and looks like resilience is pretty well on the decline as well there in both of those situations. So then we asked the question, should one persist in this situation? I mean, we can look at that guy there and ask, well, should he persist? Or is it time to change? And that's kind of a simplistic way to capture the those terms, persist or change. It's possible that that guy could have resilience, get back up. It might take a day or a week or a month, but maybe. Resistance looks pretty bleak for that boxer at this point. So that's what we're trying to do, is look at all these adaptation measures that I've laid out and try to decide, well, should we persist or should we change? Or in some cases, you know, I've got a category that's persist/change. And and with each of the chapters, I laid out my best guesses of whether, with each of the adaptations, whether we should persist or change. And maybe we'll go to the next slide, Chris. And Luke sent I don't know how long ago it was, Luke, but a couple of weeks ago, sent out I was really impressed with Luke's work. He'd done 2 or 3 iterations, and in the final iteration said he wasn't sure that he necessarily was on the same page with the stuff that I'd put in on everything, but felt he was close. And then I realized, well, I really hadn't gone to the trouble of defining with each of those presentations, persist or persist change, why that I had arrived at that decision. And so what I did with Luke's chapter and Nate's, which by far was the very biggest chapter, just a whole bunch of persist, change, and just spend enough time to write a small paragraph like you see there, that this was my thinking as to why something was in that category. And you can see, looking, you know, just take a look at any of them. I just quickly tried to say, here's what I was thinking. And then when it was appropriate, listed the slides in the 450 that pertain directly to that topic. So I haven't done it with the other chapters, but really the first time it arrived to me as a need was with Luke's work, and I was just so impressed with his efforts, and so I sent that on to Luke. The other chapters would be much easier to do that in, because there's a quarter or less of the amount of those categories. Anyway, that's the impetus for undertaking that work, and to help Luke hopefully look at those and say, boy, I agree, I disagree, and here's why I disagree, or you need something else here. And the hope would be that all the commissioners could do the same thing. Just look at them and see where we need to change these persist or persist change categories. And then logically, that would then go into the type of product that we were talking about earlier here. Let's go to the next one, Chris.
Marty, that is fantastic. What you did there, Marty, is perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, you bet, Luke. It was my pleasure. I was just, I think it was the 3rd iteration that you had produced, and I just said, man, there's a guy going above and beyond, and I really appreciate it. So this is, you can see the source there is in 2020. This is a more recent attempt to do the same kind of approach in trying to decide how to deal with climate adaptation issues. It's also gaining some acceptance, but and you can all see the little diagram there. accept, resist, or direct. The only thing that that diagram does not totally accurately present is after the first decision, if you go yes, it says, are you managing for historical conditions or a new desired condition? It doesn't say it, but it does in the literature that are you managing for historical or current conditions? So, and that's important if you're trying to decide whether to persist or correct, persist or change. We may not want to manage for historical conditions, but yet want to persist with current conditions. One more slide there, Chris. And in this framework, I'm not suggesting we necessarily move to this framework. I think it's useful, but I think we have a good framework. But I just felt it was important for the commissioners to know that how the language has evolved over time, and probably most importantly, how it applies to our situation. Each of these techniques or ways of dealing with climate change were developed for mostly for larger scale approaches. And I think it's more important that we utilize the information and the data and the experience and all of our collective expertise to talk about what works for the city, regardless of the terminology. A couple things from this framework that I thought were important just to throw out here is, and I just put them as footnotes. In the temporal element, you'll see that the sentence, particularly common in the near term, might be attempting to resist a trajectory of change, finding this approach to be futile or at least too costly to justify, and then either accepting or directing change. Well, we could, that could classify our approach to not wanting high severity fire on our ownership or in the city of Ashland or in the watershed, but that at some point in the future with climate change, we may have to change. So over time, once you make a decision doesn't mean that it can't change in the future, how to approach it. And in the last paragraph, it says, or the last sentence, Chris, maybe you can highlight that. Applying the Rad framework will help managers consciously anticipate these possibilities early on using monitoring and adaptive management to better evaluate success as they resist or direct. Well, the city's been, I just have to say, city's has a really good history of monitoring and choosing, adaptively moving in an appropriate direction. So when we started on this path, I just felt like the Forest Lands Commission had such a good history of doing this work that it would be natural for the Forest Lands Commission to be able to take these frameworks and use them. But it really, what it depends on is to take these persist and change classifications that I've thrown out and critically judge them and see that whether they're appropriate or whether they need some adjustment. And then the last paragraph is on the spatial element. It changes over space, over place too, approach to climate change. And again, let's see where the point I'm making here is in the first sentence. Because vulnerability to climate change varies spatially, so should adaptation strategies. Agency missions, stakeholder preferences, and management objectives also vary spatially. Management applications will need to vary spatially in response. Well, the thing that's, I think, in reviewing all the literature that I have, the city's unique in that we're responding and have been on a very fine scale, localized microsite kind of scale. And we've varied our applications to fit depending on some really fine scale differences. I happen to believe that if we're going to be successful with dealing with climate change, that it will be our, first and foremost, our ability to do it at this level, at least on places where there's a lot of difference on a very small scale. Some places in the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere in the world, you know, there's more uniformity in the conditions over larger areas, maybe not as critical, but not on our ownership. And I really feel like the city's ability to do that fine scale work as we've exhibited in you know, the various Restoration 2, Restoration 3 are just really, really important to be successful. So that's kind of the history and some descriptions of why we're at persistent change. Even with the further, you know, developments, I still think persistent change is at least for me, is a totally appropriate way to look at it, as long as everybody else feels that way and it makes sense for them. Any questions or comments or any discussion there?
I'm not able to see people's hands, but yeah, looks like Frank's got something.
Yeah, that's the first time I've seen that that presentation, Marty. Could you send that out so everybody else can look at it too?
Yeah, I'm Chris, that can be done, can it?
Yeah, I'll send it out.
Yeah.
The second part is, I like the idea of the persistent change just because it's so simple. But there might be times when we need a third option that wouldn't quite fit in there. And one of the things I found in looking at the literature, some stuff from the Journal of Forestry, it's called The Application of the Forest Carbon Management Menu. And it's got about 7 management strategies and 5 or 6 different options inside each one of them. And they all fit under that persistent change. So you, on a general sense, you could talk about persistent change and it'll cover almost everything. And if you need any additional information, those other sources are available too. And I sent that out to someone yesterday. If people want to see it, I can send that one out too. But you'll end up getting buried in all the literature. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, I had the same issue. After I read so much and, you know, dove into the literature, trying to find something that would work for us I really felt simplifying it became more important. But as an example, Frank, that pub or that project synthesis you sent out on Port Orford, you know, that was really good work for climate change. You know, those guys are really great professionals, but man, that's one species. It's like, wow. I mean, this is really, if we had to do that kind of work with every species out there, even every tree species, or let alone all the other species, wow, it's impossible. So we need to somehow bring it back down to a scale we can work on and work with.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I like the persistent change. That's the easiest way to do it. And by the way, there's another vulnerability assessment for sugar pine if people want to read that.
Yeah, which should be, yeah. I'd like to, if you want to send that out, I'd like to see it again, Frank. I haven't seen it in a long time. So suffice it to say, there's maybe some species out there that we should spend more time with. But I mean, at some point we've got to, you know, do the work that we have to do.
All right, looks like maybe Stephanie, did you want to say something?
Well, I just kind of tried to drop in just to find out if there's anything that you needed from me. My son just came for a visit, so I'm gonna go back to that. But is there anything council-wise that you wanted an update on?
Well, I can't think of anything myself. Is there something from the council that you want us to?
Well, you know, I think that the discussion that you're having relates to the council in terms of certainly how much do you put to adaptation? How much do you put to prevention? They're really big concepts. I think I'd like to somehow figure out how to introduce them to council members so they understand them. You know, I found what you sent out, Celia, before the material really interesting. I think what I would say about the council and what I think is important is being sure I try to make the council be aware of the importance of what the Forest Lands Group is doing. And that's kind of how I see my role right now is letting everybody know that it's important to continue this. And also right now what's happening is a lot of trying to figure out funding for our different departments and look at how any differences for fire affect the broader mission of this group.
You know who I love? All right. Well, thank you. Well, that's you know, putting something together that council can understand so that they can make budget decisions. That sounds like exactly what we need to be doing. So, yeah.
Okay, so.
Well, it's good seeing you all. I'm going to go see my son while he's here from LA.
And you should. Thanks, Steph. Looks like Leslie's here now. That's good. Hi. So I like what you did, Marty, and thanks, Chris, for sending that out. And that will help us all when we go about working on our chapters. If anybody else has any comments, I have to kind of look to see who's out there raising their hands or not.
Maybe Leslie, if you wanted to ask any, sorry, you kind of missed the tail end of Marty's presentation on the persist change, because it was actually your question that did all that.
Dang.
But I know when we had talked about it, you were asking about a third option, which Frank was also talking about a third option. And as I remember, you actually had a name for the option, and I can't remember what that was right offhand. But
I don't know that I did. If I did, I don't remember, but I felt pretty strongly that having this binary persist or change doesn't actually fit most situations, and that most of the time you're persisting with adaptive management, and there's some sort of tweaking or altering that's taking place, and that like persist sort of means like doing the exact same thing that we were doing. And so I was just a little concerned about how we deal with that, because when you really get down to each one of these management recommendations, it's kind of hard to actually determine whether they're persist or change, because it's usually persist with some changes. That was my observation.
I would agree. It is hard. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure which category that would fit in. And I described one situation, Leslie, where the same action results in both persist and change at the same time, just from a different perspective. So that's why in the vegetation chapter, I felt compelled to try to put down how I arrived at those classifications. The intermediate position is in the presentation is the one that says persist / change, where it's both at the same time. And so there is that, but there, you know, if the commissioners wanted to come up with another term or another approach that would be something more intermediate that specifically fits our needs, well, that'd be fine. It might be outside the current climate change literature and approaches, but hey, you know, that's our job if we want to do that.
Yeah, I think you know, I think it will be good. You know, you've given us a good foundation to go ahead and work, and I think as we go along and we find out that you know, if we're like, we just can't make these terms work, well, then we come back together, and or maybe as we work through it, we'll like what Frank just observed, that you know, that those two terms cover a whole bunch of things, that in the Journal of Forestry, they used 7 different terms, but if you really think about it, the way that Frank presented it, that it could boil down to persist or change. So I kind of like that, again, for its simplicity. And but I also, like I said earlier, we're not going to close our minds off and say, nope, we're stuck with that. If we really need another term, or if we're really finding out there's an approach that we really want to do that's not addressed in this approach, well then, you know, we're going to be open to that.
Quick comment, Sil.
Oh, thank you, John.
Yeah, I actually love the binariness of having those 2 categories, because it's going to be very helpful, I think, with the people who need to make those decisions about prescriptions and about management going forward. They'll either be able to quickly tell there's nothing we need to do right now, or there's some degree of change that we need to do, whether that's a little bit of change, a small adaptation, or a complete rewrite, you know, in the worst case scenario. So I like that binary decision making that we're essentially helping managers do by putting those labels on different things. So that's just my 2 cents.
One thing I'll add that I don't think I said, for me, the most important thing is that we have a process that all the commissioners and Chris and I, that we're all kind of talking the same language, and that that we understand the issues to some degree when we're all done. Whatever facilitates that, great. So, you know, each of you that are on the commission are going to be people in the community that others will turn to one way or another. And so, you know, the more we go through it and kind of wrestle with the issues a little bit, the better off we'll all collectively be. That's how I view that anyway.
Yeah, sounds good.
I kind of agree with both on that one. You know, it seems like in some ways it's all gray area, but then when it comes to persist change, but then coming from like the timber and the fire world, it's kind of like a go, no go, like what John was saying. It's, are we moving forward with this or not? And we could just get lost in the gray area, but I kind of like the go, no go style approach to this, just continuing to adapt, but kind of looking at like thumbs up, thumbs down, and then just move forward and adapt. So I kind of see pluses and minuses to both approaches. I don't know if there's a way to have some kind of meet in the middle deal.
Well, again, to reiterate, Luke, and that last slide talked about how you can start at one point and over time go to the other point. That's adaptive management. And in one place, you can be persisting, and next door, you can be changing. So we need that kind of flexibility in order to successfully deal with climate change. We definitely need that flexibility. And so none of this is intended to be, when we're done with this iteration of our work, we're just beginning, really. We're setting a framework, but it should evolve as things evolve, temporally and spatially.
Yeah.
And socially.
Like, Leslie has a question.
Yeah, it just got me thinking, listening to Luke talk about the sort of simplicity of the go, no go type of categorization. Is the persist or change category, is that a way that we're going to be highlighting to decision makers, like areas that need funding, areas that need projects? I mean, is that like the primary purpose of these? I don't really understand why it matters if we say persist or change. And maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe the things that actually get labeled as change are things that are going to get money or that we will be pursuing. Is that why they're relevant?
Anybody want to take a stab at that?
John had a hand up. John Owen.
My thought on that is that as we propose specific projects from the various chapters, then the whole question of resist or persist or change, I think, is going to partially be answered in the cost elements that are put forward, and then there will be a decision made on what the budget can accommodate and which projects then take the higher level and get implemented. And I would think that that exchange between the two is going to determine the course, and that is, I suspect, cost will have a big part to play in bridging that gap between resist or change. And that will kind of determine which direction we take, I suspect. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I also just as an aside, not that we're going to start doing this now, but I'm thinking of a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, the Wildfire Safety Commission. They had a lot of ideas, a lot of great ideas of what they wanted to do, and in the city, the way the budget was, didn't have the money to do it. And so the commission, being advisors to the council, they wrote up some justifications for funding to do some of these things. Now, I don't know the outcome, whether they got the funding that they wanted or they didn't, but I didn't feel that, and I don't think anybody at the time felt that it was out of line that they gave that advice or recommendation to city council. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that, Chris?
Yeah, by and large, no new money came out of that, though it didn't hurt to have some priorities during the budget setting process. And I think that will come up again once it'll be next year when we go into the budget planning process for the next biennium. So it does help me, just as in the staff position, to help to prioritize what funding we do have right now that can go to city forest land management, and or what grant opportunities we might look for externally. And there are opportunities out there, and some of them might really help some of our action items, but without a plan in place to make that justification for a grant, we can't really, hard to really apply at all without that, without the strategic plan document in place and a proposal. So it is infinitely useful in helping us figure out what to do, when to do it, and how to pay for it.
All right, great. Should we move on to the vegetation chapter revised outline with Luke? And it has me doing this, but as I explained to a couple folks, I have been on the road and I haven't had a chance to look too much at what Luke has done. So I asked Luke to get with Chris or Marty, and so I'm going to ask you guys to take it away.
All right, well, yeah, I guess just curious about feedback and then next steps. So kind of looking for some direction and or feedback, whether or not we want to do that and make those decisions here and now, and then I can send out a new one. I have not had time. I believe I wrote in the email with the latest version attached, I was going to kind of go through and look at Marty's slides just to confirm that we were on the same page. Marty already touched on that a little bit, and I have yet to take his response and fold that in. But more than anything, I guess I'm curious still on what the next step for me would be on this.
I'll just chime in real quick and just say I appreciate all you did, Luke, in revising the outline after last meeting and getting input, which you did pretty much like within a few days. And the second outline was like, that looked really good. And I know you and Marty exchanged a little bit of information back and forth, and then as we saw in that document that while Marty was talking, that analysis describing the thoughts, decision process behind his recommendations seemed really really helpful. And maybe you didn't have that at the time that you did the second outline, or did you? No. So that just for everybody who's working on outlines, and for now leading into next month or whatever the schedule is we decide on for finalizing outlines, is Marty is available. And I think we maybe didn't do a good job of explaining this, but maybe now it's more apparent, to go through that rationale with any of the groups and talk it over with you to say, okay, this was what I was thinking, and this is why. And you're free to give them a call, work something up so that you can go walk through outlines with questions as to, why were you thinking this? And maybe you end up saying, yeah, okay, we agree with that, or nah, not so much. And then we can bring those discussions back to the main group in a business meeting. So I just want to throw that out there. And I'm hoping that we can get to where everybody has seen your revised outline, and we can generally say, yeah, that's a really nice format. Not that every heading is fitting every chapter, because all chapters are in some ways different, but at least the format of the outline is something that looks like, okay, that's something we could all work with. Leslie?
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I mean, what I envisioned happening today is, well, I think the group that got together to talk about sort of the what are we doing, and I think you guys did that earlier, to write that document. We all sort of thought that your second version was a huge improvement, and that it might be really useful to look at it in terms of a universal template or structure that we can all follow. And I think I would feel so great if we could come out of this meeting tonight having a real idea of the type of structure that each outline is going to look like. And from my perspective, what I've seen from your second version is it's really darn close to what I think could work.
Technically, it's his third, so he has been a busy beaver. But yeah, it does sound like everybody's really, you know, liking that structure. And, you know, so if we're, you know, right now we're talking about this veg chapter outline structure, and, you know, we don't have it in front of us, but everybody's, I think, had a chance to see it. If we need it to be sent out again, you know, then please let us know so that we have that. At some point, we really do need to set up a common filing place where all this stuff goes, because, you know, I just don't have the capacity to store a lot of documents or you know, to be able to keep different drafts straight and comments and all that. And I think a common like Dropbox or Google will be really helpful. So we should talk about that. But for right now, if there's any more you want to say about the veg chapter revised outline, or if anybody has any questions about that, I'll look to see if anybody's hands are up.
Yeah, real quick. Oh, Frank, I know you got something to say, but thanks everyone for the good feedback. And I like bad feedback too. You know, criticism's great. I've got thick skin, so if you know, anything else is also helpful. But I do want to say, so what did people like? Was it the presentation in the table format, or was it having persistent change in each of the bullet points? Because I think that's what was changed the most. Was it the table formatting that was a good presentation, or what?
Can we put it up? Let's have it up while we're talking. That would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, for me, it was the persist change.
Right, I guess I'm just asking because so each one of them, pretty much what is in the bullets is also in the tables. And so I think the table, that was direction from Chris as a way to present it. So is that what people liked? Is that what we're looking at for our universal template? Is the tables, is my question?
For me, I like the tables, but Frank is dying to say something.
Yeah, please.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, the tables are great. That is a very concise way to share information. You get away from the narrative and you just go click, click, there you are. That's a great way to do it. I do have a concern about this format though. I'm not sure the terrestrial vegetation and fire format is going to fit very well with water quality in the sense of the actual stream channel. Because that's a whole different, the aquatic ecosystem is different from the terrestrial. So we may need a separate, but similar approach for aquatic ecosystems as what we have here for the terrestrial ones.
Yeah, and I thought that would be the case. Could we, what are the common elements that are most useful that would transfer between those two worlds? Is it, can we maintain the bullet and change persist along with the tables? Would that, just the formatting part of it, not, the headings are going to be different, and the content of the tables, obviously, and the bullets, but can we maintain the bullet, table, and heading format?
If you're asking me, I would say, yeah, just like it's written here, except eventually those bullets are going to get turned into narratives. And that's why the tables will be so important, because that'll just be a concise way of saying what's in the narrative. But the tables and bullets are good.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused here because the tables and the bullets are the same thing. So it, based on what was said about liking the tables, my next step would be to delete all the bullets because it's redundant. It's just taking up a lot of space. But then I guess with Frank saying the bullets themselves will kind of lead to the narrative, I guess I could see having the narrative fleshed out from the bullets and then just keeping the table as the stripped down version. Is that what people are liking?
That was my thought as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I would think, that yeah, your bullets turn into a narrative and then your table is a great summary.
Okay, super. Yeah, that works for me. Thanks for the clarifications on that.
Anybody else? Speak up, because I can't see your lovely hands or faces. Okay, well, if we've we've looked at this veg chapter, and we're liking that, and so we're wondering about the chapter outlines and final template. And I would say that, it looks to me like we have a winner. Thank you. And you're confirming, Luke, that it's not always good to go first. I'm glad that I didn't go first. You did, and it was great that you reworked it, and I think that at this point we could say, see how it works with your chapters that you have, and I can readily see how it might apply to our chapters and see where we might do something different, but it'll be really similar. So I don't know how other people are thinking. I've only seen Luke's and then mine and Leslie. I have not seen what Frank and John Williams did. And so if there's some
people, you sent that out.
What's that?
You sent out like half a dozen pages.
Well, no, I know that I shouldn't say I haven't seen it. I've seen it, but we haven't like presented it to the commission and within the business meeting. And so what I'm wondering is, are we, do we need to look at that? Are there some elements of what you worked on that you would want to put out there? Or, this is our point. This is our time to decide on what kind of outline template to use.
So, Sil?
Yes.
John and I haven't received any feedback from anyone on the stuff we sent out, and it would be helpful for us if we could get some of that from the group.
Right. Yeah, I think, well, last month, of course, we were intending to, look at all the outlines and look at what everybody's done. And, we didn't get past veg. So that's okay, because everybody's acknowledged the veg is very big. And so at this point, then I would ask then, what would our next steps be for deciding on a format or a template? Again, Frank, my guess is that you put a lot of content and great information in there that I definitely want to see. Right now we're focusing on, outline and format. How do you want to present that, the work that you've done?
The easiest thing would just be to have everybody on the commission read the stuff that we put together and send all your comments to John. I'm serious.
That's fair, since Frank did all the work. But yeah, maybe the thing to do now, Sil, is if we do have a template, you can give us comments and I'll edit them into the new format so that it looks like Luke's.
Yeah, I think it would be much, for at least for me, I feel like it would be easier to give feedback if I understood how we were presenting the information and how it was organized. And all of our efforts are very different. So I hate to suggest this, but I'd rather have all of us get back together and try to create a somewhat uniform versions of our chapters and then have feedback. But I think we could do it either way, but that's a suggestion.
Yeah, I think maybe just if I ask the question, Frank, how close do you feel your outline at the current state is to Luke's third version that we just looked at? How much work would it take to get it there if it's not?
We've got some tables, and the bullets are really just cut and paste out of Marty's slides. Like, for example, I'll give you, for instance, it's not our piece, but there's a couple of places where Pacific Fisher is mentioned. And so rather than putting a bullet that says Pacific Fisher, Marty's got a whole slide on Pacific Fisher. So I just plug that in, and I would use that stuff as we develop it. But right now it's real flexible. I would just like to get some feedback, and John too, I guess, just to see what everybody else thinks about this, because it's not exactly going to set up like Luke's, but it'll be close.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt like for ours, there would be no point in us, putting forward our outlines, because they are in a completely different format and structure. And now that, I've got this introduction paper that you guys did, and a better understanding of the Persist change, I'd like to go back and do what Leslie suggested, is take what the work that we did do and put it into a similar format as Luke's, and then and then present, because it would be I think that would just be more useful for us. And because we have not, presented or gotten any feedback yet either, Frank, because, we didn't get beyond veg yet, as a group.
Yeah, Frank, I could take ours and try to put them into the new format, and then we could resend them to everybody. And that might make it easier for everybody to review.
Yeah, and then looks like John Owen has something.
I just wanted to say I'd like to see the revisions sent to us for review before we get back together to discuss and decide. That's all.
Yeah. Okay, well then that kind of makes our, this discussion, we're ahead of schedule. What do you know? So if anybody, I think what I'm hearing, to summarize from everybody, is that we like the basic structure and format that Luke did, and we're all going to go back and stay working in pairs for now, and restructure those outlines that we all did, and go from there. Now John Owen is our new member, and so you're not in one of the pairs, but we can put you on there, or you can be a roaming person, or how would you like to step into this, or should we? What do you think, John?
Well, I think I'd rather just be a roaming one, and because there's a learning curve here that I'm into at this point, and I'd like to see more before I commit to one group or another. I mean, I'm in one group with you know, the four of us worked on the preliminary, but I'd like to see the chapter outlines, and you all are much more informed and on top of that than I would be at this point. So I would rather just roam and look at all of them, and then hopefully be able to make comments that could be utilized in the final, for the final template.
Yeah, so I think, then, you know, that's great. Then as we get together with our pairs and agree on, you know, times or, you know, when we plan to meet, reach out to John and reach out to John Owen, and so that he can have a taste of what we're all doing. And it seems to me that we kind of have our next steps, right? Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, Marty.
Yeah, Luke, you were talking about the bullet points, and you know, I'd be willing to do the similar type of thing with the persistent change, just to you know, kind of present how I arrived at it in a paragraph with the other chapters too. It might make that easier to do the bullet points. And it shouldn't take me long to do that. The other chapters are so much shorter than the vegetation. Yeah, that's right. And including with our reaching out to John Owen so that he can taste, you know, we definitely have Marty at as a great resource that we can call Marty as we're going through this too.
Hey, Sil.
Yeah.
Could you send out an email, or have Chris send out an email after the meeting with whatever Luke's final template is, or revision of his chapter? It sounds like he was going to tweak it a little bit, but send that out, and then that is something we'll use as a Word file, just as a template that the rest of us can use.
Yep, we can do that. That'd be great.
Yeah. Luke, do you intend to do more than that third version that we just pulled up?
Not necessarily, except to modify it to fit some of what Marty provided. I have not yet reviewed that information that Marty shared. So the only changes would be tweaking wording and or labels. It would not be to the format or the structure.
Okay. One I think like to throw out is, as you're doing the outlines, you know, one of the main points of this whole exercise is to evaluate Marty's evaluation, as it were. So if you look at them, you agree, great. We probably don't need to talk a lot more about that. But if you disagree or have questions about Marty's recommendation to change or persist or change/persist, then somehow make it in red or something so it pops out. So when you come back next month, we talk about it, we can really highlight those items without having to spend a lot of time on the stuff that just does make sense. I think that'll be helpful in the end.
Is there any way, Chris, we could have these all in Google Docs where we could all put comments, and it would keep track of what everybody's comments are, and there's a nice history there? Or...
yeah, Leslie's shaking her head because she knows from the parks.
It sucks so much. I don't think we can use it, can we?
As far as I understand, we shouldn't, because it's not public information there. How to do it, I can't exactly say that there's a great way, because if we could do that, that would be the perfect way to do it. But
as if the public has access to all of our computers.
Well, right. I mean, I even have like kind of a work Gmail that we do that just internally for partner meetings and stuff. But when it's a public process like this, that's different. So I'm happy to be the repository for versions, whatever you want, send it, I'll store them. And I know it's hard to edit that way when you get comments on top of comments, but let's just say don't do track changes, because that gets really messy with a lot of people. Just put in comments on the sides.
That's a good thing. So is it that Google isn't something, or like we couldn't use Dropbox either for the same reason?
I think for the same reason, but let me double check that with, I don't know, city attorney or city recorder, somebody who knows, just to see what's possible. But I think Leslie's probably got the inside scoop on that one from the Parks Commission's work. So I wouldn't hold out too much hope.
I mean, I'd like to think that, you know, this Zoom reality is not going to last forever. And when we can start meeting in person, you know, we keep saying, I know for at least Luke and Frank and I, we can't think straight without flip charts and colored pens. And, you know, I think when we can meet in person, it will be a lot better. But we just have to kind of make do with what we've got for now. And if Chris has, if he can manage it, and, you know, and we have some consistent labeling with what it is we're looking at and dating of these documents or something like that, that would be great. And so maybe when we, Chris, when we send out the outline with Luke's outline and format, maybe we can also kind of talk about some labeling protocols so that we can keep all this stuff straight. And I'm the least organized person in the world. So I'm not sure I'm the best one to dream that up, but definitely, you know, can look up, you know, some kind of standard labeling protocols and, you know, write that up so that we can use them. I'm getting is there somebody asking a question? Okay.
I am.
Frank.
Oh, Frank.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're looking for that, there's a whole bunch of like how to write technical papers, publications that are out, like how to write a general technical report. And we use some of that stuff for the forest plan, but there's probably some updates on it now. But that would be like a manual for, you know, how to put it together if you want to find one.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. So I think those are our next steps, and I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget. And if we don't have any more questions about that, we could go on to new business. And the folks are ready to go with that. Then the new business is commission meeting time. So I know in the past, Frank has brought that up, and I have, but it's been a while since I've even thought about it. And then recently, Leslie asked a question, and so I thought we revisit it and affirm we have the best time possible for everybody, or we change it. So,
well, ironically, my conflict is done, so I can make 5:30, but I totally, it's you know, for those of us that like to eat dinner with our families, I got little kids, so I usually eat early with my family to then come to a meeting. But at this point, my thing that has been making me late is no longer going to happen. So I'm kind of 6 of one, half dozen the other.
Anybody else
John's got his hand
have
up.
anything about the meeting times?
I like it.
I would just throw in that, you know, as somebody who's on a half a dozen different boards and commissions, it's kind of an exercise in futility to change meeting times, especially long established meeting times, just because year after year, we can't predict our lives. People's daily routines change. And at the very least, by having something that fits nicely within the city's commission schedule, that is a long-standing date, commissioners know what the meeting schedule is when they sign up for this gig. And so I would vote to just keep it what it is, recognizing that, of course, it is challenging for some people. It's just, there's so much tradition and history to this particular time. So.
Yeah, I find that there's not gonna be one great meeting time for everybody. Yeah, I've gotten used to this time, and so for me, I'm good with this time. But I did want to just put it out there if somebody did want to change that.
Well, actually, I'd like to change it, but I think I'm outvoted. So I'll go with what the group says.
Did you want to go later, Frank? It's just 5:30 is early to me.
I'm thinking more like 9 a.m.
I can't take that much time out of my work day. Like already there's all these advisory councils and APRC that have to be between 9 and 5. I would prefer to keep in the evenings. Unfortunately, I'd love that, but.
Yeah, I think we're going to end up with the 5:30 one, but I just wanted to say, yeah, I could go for a different time, but if the group wants to stay at 5:30, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I could probably do well with a daytime, but it's because I don't have a day job. And so I know it, for folks that are working, the 5:30 seems to be a time that can be done.
Half of us work, half of us don't. One person's perfect time is going to be another person's horrible time. So,
yeah. Okay, well, I just wanted to bring that up. And so we'll move on. The one little new business that I wanted to add on, it's pretty small, but I've noticed just that I've looked at the signs that are along the trails in the watershed, or I should say at the beginning of the trails in the watershed, and a typical sign about, dogs on leash and picking up your dog. And, there's something about poison oak and things like that, but there's nothing on those signs that says no smoking. And the day that I noticed it, it was like, maybe there should be a little no smoking there. I think it's obvious to people, but anyway, so that was my comment that I would pass on to the Parks Commission about our signage, that or do we need an actual ordinance that says no smoking in the watershed? I don't know if there is one. But like I said, I just saw that sign and just thought that was a missing thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I will mention it.
Are you talking about fire season or all the time?
Well, good question. I don't know. But I think it would be a lot easier to just say no smoking in the watershed or on the trails. I mean, we already have the no camping and no campfires. I think that is an ordinance. So
general statement too, just about fire danger and no open flame or something like that. So, because that's going to be potentially an increasing problem going forward with climate change in our watershed. So maybe we do need to get that in place the next time signs are made for the watershed, or if there's some way for them to easily attach something to existing signs, but probably makes sense to do it next time signs are changed out. Because most of the signs up there is somebody who's installed a bunch of them. Most of them, you know, are cemented into the ground and then bolted onto a post, and they're designed to be permanent.
Right, and so are we talking about some kind of like city ordinance closing the watershed to smoking? Is that what you're saying? I don't know, I'm just trying to, I get where you're coming from, but it's a little weird to think someone could be walking by like in the dead of winter when piles are being burned and broadcast burning is going on, and they say, oh, I'm gonna smoke a little club cigarette on my walk with my coffee, and there's like wildfire smoke all in the air and graybacks out there with drip torches, and we're like, no smoking in the watershed. I don't know, I'm just trying to kind of figure out what that would look like. While I may agree or disagree with, I'm kind of ambivalent still with allowing it, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. I brought it up for discussion. I think of, well, I think of, state parks or our, any of our parks or, national forest. And, there's rules about smoking, about like having an area cleared around you before you do, or no traveling around smoking. And I don't think it's, it's not fire season dependent. It's just like, if you're gonna smoke, then here's where you can do it, or here's how, or, and I doubt that it's probably enforced much, when it's raining and snowing. And so I could see what you'd mean about a loss of credibility. But again, I think of, it just seemed like it was something lacking, that there would not be anything there about fire danger at trailheads. And so maybe, this would be an example of use trail use. Then, maybe it is something for the Parks Commission to take up. And do we want to, pass on a recommendation of, do we want to get specific, or do we want to say, why don't you look at this issue of smoking on trails and let them decide? And Leslie might have a comment there.
Oh, well, maybe this is old news to you all, but I'm still learning. I see that their APRC does have a quite extensive smoking ban in their parks and around areas like walkways and all downtown and throughout Lithia. I didn't see any examples in Jackson County of open space smoking prohibited. It all appears to be in parks. Although, I mean, it doesn't sound completely, it sounds pretty within the realm of possibility that the Recreation Division Advisory Council might want to think about that. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen anyone smoking in the watershed in my life. So I don't know how much of a problem it is. I think a much bigger concern are transients and people making illegal fires and camping, but I think it's still valid for sure.
Yeah, I can't say I've seen it. I've smelled it.
So,
and I've seen the results of, like, wow, somebody was sitting here having a party smoking in behind this big shrub. So I don't know how big of a problem it is, but I know it does happen sometimes. And it looks like John Owen has something. And
yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's more realistic to, if you're going to have something, say, no open fires in the watershed, because that's really where, with the transients and all, that's I think where you're going to get the real problem.
Yeah. So maybe we have the rules all over, and maybe some signing that just increases the awareness. It's not a bad thing.
Doesn't
Frank?
Southwest Forestry say when they have their fire closures or whatever the fire level is, where smoking is allowed? Because you could tier to that. Because usually they say, like, you can't smoke outside of a vehicle or something like that, and that's in the standard fire closures. So you could refer to that.
Yeah, Frank's right. As fire season ratchets up, smoking gets banned outside of basically every place except on a boat or inside a vehicle. But that's not something that's necessarily posted at trailheads. Where we have trailheads that have those kiosks that we can unlock and put new signage in, we can post a sign once that regulation takes place for the entirety of the summer fire season. But there's only really White Rabbit and Red Queen. Oh, and then down at the swim reservoir, there's one too. So there's actually 3 places where that could be put up.
So, so Leslie, what would, is there anything that you would need to, well, I guess I should ask the commission, is this just like, is this worth taking up? Or since we had some time, I thought I'd bring it up. And if it's no big deal and nobody's worried about it, then we can just let it go too.
I think if it's within our jurisdiction to talk about and make some recommendations on, it's probably worth talking about. It's certainly going to be potentially an increasing issue for city forest lands.
Okay, yeah, another place we could take it up is in the recreation section of our climate adaptation too.
Yeah.
I found some really nice outreach materials that go with this theme that I'll just throw on the screen.
Oh, I like that.
It's like,
I really like
the
that.
problem is I doubt that signs are very effective for the very few people that are actually going to smoke cigarettes when they're up in the watershed. They don't care whether a sign is there or not. But yeah, so I personally don't see it as a huge priority, something that we like have to dedicate time and energy to. But yeah, I think in the future it might be an issue.
Yeah, it's a huge problem in Lithia Park and the forest lands immediately surrounding Lithia Park where transients tend to go. Every time I've found a camp, there's cigarette butts all over the place. But then again, are they really going to pay attention to those rules? And is anybody going to enforce it? I see really lax enforcement from the police department on pretty much all the Lithia Park rules. So
yeah.
I don't know, but there are signs at every entrance to Lithia Park pretty much about smoking already. It's just in the forest lands.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I feel heard. So thank you very much. And yeah, I'll just you know, I put a bug in Leslie's ear, and if I feel like we want to put that in and address it along with our climate change adaptation, we can. So if we're done with that, I see that we are coming up on our time to go, but Luke has wants to talk about the Trails Master Plan Review Subcommittee, which is something we just found out about.
That's me actually, but
oh, I'm sorry.
Luke is part of it, and I think Sil and maybe Chris as well, but I just wanted the whole Forest Lands Commission to know that one of the Ashland Parks Recreation Commission, one of our kind of priorities for this biennium was to review a proposal written by RVMBA, the Rogue Valley Mountain Bike Association, that looks at the existing mountain bike trails within, they're focusing mostly on city-owned land and parks land. And it's been a while since I read the document, but I believe that most of these are modifications of existing trails, improvements, or places where there's safety concerns, because RVMBA has been told many, many times about this carrying capacity and density of trails. So their approach with this report was to be like, look, let's look at the trails we've got and how can we make them better, more rideable, safer, reduce conflict, etc. So APRC has been getting, and you all probably too, have been getting proposals for lots of different mountain bike trails. And the decision was made to just sort of look at this entire package of proposals and see if any or all or none of them can get sort of added as an addendum to the Trails Master Plan, which was finalized not very long ago, but it didn't have a very robust section on mountain biking. And as this sort of sector grows and we're getting Chamber of Commerce is interested in it and all these groups are interested in it, where APRC wanted to look at that. So I believe that Luke, who was on the original Trails Master Plan, has been invited to be part of the Master Plan Review, which is specifically looking at mountain bike trails. And Sil, are you doing it as well?
Yep.
And I'm going to be representing APRC, as well as Rick Launt is the other commissioner. And then Chris, are you on this or no?
I did get re-invited because I was on the original one. I don't want to be too redundant, but I can also talk a little bit about trail safety, because we do a lot of rescues on trails and how we might be able to facilitate safer trails for the riders.
Yeah, so you know, I think there's good representation, but I also would want to make sure that you know what's going on, and it'd be interesting as we try to define like who's responsible for what and how these divisions and jurisdictions are going to change or whatever. I know, John, you might not know John Owen. In the past, we've talked about, you know, if recreation and user issues should get moved from the Forest Lands Commission over to Ashland Parks and Recreation, and well, that's kind of hanging in the air. So there's some questions about how to divvy up some of these management issues. So I just wanted to throw that out there so you all know what's going on. I think we're meeting for the first time next week. And we, of course, will keep you posted and ask for input, I think, if you'd like that to be involved. And I look forward to getting more clarity on where Forest Lands Commission sort of authority is needed and wanted, and where all these, and how that works with APRC. And then, of course, when you move past city lands into the Forest Service lands, it gets even more complicated and tricky. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. And if anyone wanted to talk about it, we can.
Well, that's great, Leslie. Thank you. Yeah, I've just been finding out about this a lot and getting a meeting scheduled in the last couple of days. And we'll look forward to doing that. And maybe we can just have that as a ongoing business to keep people apprised of where we're at with that.
I'm going to put a link in the chat bar to the report itself, so you can look at it. By the way, if you're, I'll do that.
That would be great.
Frank's got his.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Frank.
Just Leslie reminded me of this, talking about the trails. We need an infrastructure chapter in the climate change adaptation. We don't have anybody assigned to that yet. John Owen.
You like telling him things.
Yeah.
Well, it's worth talking about. Why, I'm just curious why we would need an infrastructure chapter. Are we changing infrastructure?
Yeah. Did you pay any attention to Hurricane Ida on the East Coast? All the 1960s and 70s infrastructure got ripped apart because of the storms. And if we're planning on more intense storms around here, we might want to take a look at our infrastructure and see where the phone lines and the electric and all that other stuff is that cuts across city forest lands.
There's only one electric line. Well, yeah, I think so. The one from the water treatment plant down. But I would suggest this commission not take that up and just make a recommendation to Public Works and let them know that we are thinking about this and we think it's worth looking at. Chances are they've probably done that work in some kind of consultant or plan already, but I'm happy to take that up. I know they just contacted me about dead trees along that same power line. So they patrol it and we do mitigation to help clear it, although it is only intermittently on. But that's one example. The one that comes to mind is that power line.
Yeah, the last time we did it, it did come out of Public Works. Peter Smank was the guy who did it. I'm sure he doesn't work there anymore, but there's probably somebody who has that same role. And if they could look at what we've done in the past and give us the update, that'd be a nice way to delegate the work out, because we didn't really do it ourselves last time.
Yeah, there's a discussion with the electric department over on the Wildfire Commission side about electrical line safety, and that extends to Pacific Power outside of the city as well. But I'll think to look at the original forest plan as to what infrastructure we identified that exists, and then whose responsibility is and if there's any threat to it. But I'd be happy to shovel that into somebody else's bucket.
Well, I think it'll be a good thing to keep track of, to make sure somebody's looking at it one way or another. And we can count on Frank to make sure not let it get lost.
We can count on Frank to assign it to John O and John William.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're about out of time here, and I've got on my homework to work up an email with Luke's third version, and to talk about some labeling protocol and how we start exchanging documents. And then for everybody else, and then I'll put this in the email too, is to look at your chapters and put that into that format for presentation next time. Don't forget to call John Owen so that he can know what we're working on, and don't forget to call Marty because he'll be a big help. So I think we're about done. We can adjourn. If there's anybody else has anything else, I'm looking. Looks like John Owen.
Make sure that I understand Marty's going to send us the revisions on Luke's chapter, right? That he inputted in red. All those, you're going to send us that, right? Because I have not seen that until.
I'm going to put it all in one email.
Oh, okay, good. Just so long as we get it.
Yeah.
I actually already sent Marty's presentation document out, so you have it in your inbox already.
Great. Okay, thank you. And thank you, Marty, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. And all of you, actually. It's been very helpful.
That's great.
I missed it.
Oh, well, you got it in your inbox.
I need it more than anyone. I need the Persist change presentation.
Well, you got it in your inbox.
Okay.
And we'll be able to call Marty when we're working on our chapters, Leslie. So fear not. So, okay, well, thank you. It looks like we're adjourning right on time at 7:30. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
See you next time.
Oh, have a great
Bye,
night.
guys.